Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Sakamoto Days, Season 1, Episode 7. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, just kind of the most little adorable thing at the beginning where Hana's at school and Aoi and Sakamoto are there, and it's just kind of like, oh, and Sakamoto's just taking like all the pictures. It's just, once again, him and his family, especially because of the little moments he has later on when he said, like, when they're at the museum later in the episode, he's like, oh, I should really bring Hana here. And it's just like always, no, he's in general, he was like, no, I need to bring my family here. And then later on with the dinosaur thing, it's just, he is such a family man. It's so cute and adorable. But either way, Xiaotang and Shin are left in charge of the store, and they're bickering about everything because it's like, stop wearing my apron every time you're doing work that will make you dirty, so you're only wearing my stuff to make it dirty. And she's talking crap in her mind, and he's hearing it. And I love Heisuke just shows up like, yo! And that's his only contribution to the episode, is he shows up being like, you have any pork buns that you're going to throw out? And he picks him up later on being like, oh, you going to do anything about these? And Xiaotang's like, you can get out too. That was his only contribution to the episode. But essentially, because he was reading her, Shin was reading her mind, she was like, basically, how could I ever really be, like, how do you expect anyone to ever live comfortably around you? And that struck a chord with Shin. And it's not till later on she was like, man, it was probably wrong of me to say that. Because she was like, yeah, like, she's like, I've never seen, like, any of our back and forth bickering. I've never seen anything kind of stick to him the way that did. So there must be trauma associated with that. Because, I mean, obviously, being a telepathic person, I always do that when I want to say telepathy. I always go to telekinetic, but when being telepathic, like that ability, it can probably be a curse, because it's like, especially when you're younger and probably don't know how to control the ability, it's probably on all the time and constantly having other people's voices in your head. There's that, but there's also the element of, there probably is it kind of, maybe the way Shin grew up made him go like, I kind of have trust issues, so it's easier to always know people's true intentions when you're able to read their mind. Maybe there's something to that. I mean, something had to have led you to decide to go down the assassin, like, career path and stuff like that. So I'm curious if this kind of section of the story will end up kind of informing some of that or not. Because we really, even in this episode, we didn't really dive into Shin a lot. Well, I mean, it's centering around Shin, but we still don't know enough about his backstory in that regard. But that's just, like I said, there's got to be something associated with that, because he must have like felt like he's such an outsider. Like, people, he probably made other people, creeped them out or made them feel uncomfortable, because even those guys later on are cracking jokes about like, oh, that's got to be creepy and no one probably likes you. You don't have any friends because you're kind of like creepy and a freak, because you can read people's hair and read people's minds, and that's got to make them unnerved. I also love that Shin and Xiaotang had that whole bit where, like, when Xiaotang thinks it's Shin that came back, she's like, all right, I'll wait for you to apologize first. And he's like, all right, Xiaotang, I will accept your apology first. Like, they're both like so stubborn. They're like fire and ice in a lot of ways. Either way, it turns out that Xiaotang ends up getting kidnapped because they thought she was Shin just because of her name tag. And I love the guy said, but I think, what's his name, like Tanaka's like the main like guy in the hazmat suit, but the other guy in the driver's seat, they gave him too much personality. I was like, he's got to be someone's, well, personality in regards that he's so witty and has these like dry remarks that I'm like, it's almost like you have your personality is your lack of personality, and just like your dry demeanor and the way you say it is like, yeah, I think we got the wrong person. It's like, well, if you look, that person's obviously a girl. And he's like, no, it's just same person. Obviously they look the same. And it's like, okay. He's like, just shut up and just let us do our work, because they were hired by the lab. We learned that Shin's powers aren't, I was about to say not natural, but they are, because as it turns out, like, the lab didn't give him the abilities. They just kind of helped awaken what was already there. In fact, he's the only test subject to awaken abilities. So it very much kind of makes me think immediately of like Mob Psycho type of situation. I'm like, there's the whole claw of it all. Plus there's that guy who was kind of taking in the kids and helping them discover their psychic ability too. So, all that. But, I was like, ooh, did Shin grow up in a dark environment? But we find out later on, it seems like his environment was pretty okay. Like, the fact is, he's like, yeah, the lab used to be run by weirdos, but to the point of like kidnapping someone like that, especially because it's like, why now after all these years? Because it seems like the flashbacks show him when he was a kid. The only photo they had of Shin was when he was a kid. So I don't know if he left voluntarily or he ran away, which also begs the question, like, does he have any parents? Did they sell him to the lab? Was he a kid from an orphanage? Like, did he lose his parents when he was young? Stuff like that. But yeah, Shin came back to find Zhao Tang gone, joins up with Sakamoto. They ride the bike down the highway. I love that whole sequence. That one guy on a motorcycle and just like Sakamoto like kicking him and pushing him against the wall, and then the bike flips and hits him and it explodes. I'm like, oh yeah, because that guy's sure not dead, right? Right? And then there's another bike that explodes later on. I love that Shin's on the back of this guy's truck. He's like, yo, do you mind if I use a few? He's like, no, go ahead. I was like, oh, this guy's so chill. Why are you so cool with him just like chucking some of your lumber out? But then he's like, oh, you guys must be filming a movie, right? He's like, yeah, sure. I was like, okay, that's why he's so chill about it. But yeah, everyone got taken out. That especially that one guy, poor bastard, where Sakamoto took the bike, like the back wheel of the bike, and when jumped up, took the back wheel of the bike straight to his helmet. And I was like, yeah, we're definitely not killing these people. It's kind of like a Batman or a Spider-Man thing of like, yeah, you're kind of beating the crap out of people, but you're beating them up, you're not killing them. But either way, Seba steps up, and the moment he takes the helmet off, I'm like, oh, you're one of the people from the opening. So I was like, interesting. And his whole thing is, I don't know if it's the same regard as Shin, where there's like a natural ability that's born about from an experiment or what. Like, he kind of has this like camouflage ability. It's like, doesn't seem like he goes in. I don't know if that's invisible. It doesn't seem visibility, because it does seem like there's a shimmering to it. So it does seem more like a camouflage thing. And I don't know if it's like related to like what he was wearing, because like he zips it up all the way and then activates it. So I don't know if there's something to that. Like, I don't know, maybe it's like you want to keep your breath hidden as well, so that's why you kind of make sure a chunk, like the lower parts of your face, are covered up so no one sees your breath. I don't know what it is. Whatever the case may be, Sakamoto was still able to kind of see him. But yeah, they came out of that encounter okay. But Shin Zhao Ting was taken. Then we also meet reindeer guy. What was it? Kashima? What was that? Was that his name? Reindeer guy? I wasn't expecting us to actually see his face. Like, he lifts up the mask for a little bit. I was like, oh, I thought we just kind of make it. Because at first when we see him in the opening, I'm like, is that an actual like just reindeer head, or is that a mask? Got a quick answer to that. It's like, no, it's a mask. So... And I love what was the guy's name? Tanaka, being like, oh yeah, this is definitely a Shin, even though Seba was like, yeah, but the boss is going to really quickly find out that that's a girl and it's not the right subject. So, but Takanaka was like, oh, we'll kind of fake it and it'll be okay. And it's just like, it'll all be okay. It's like, okay, sure. But then immediately Seba's like, yeah, this is kind of a body double. This ain't the real Shin, but I'll be able to know where he is. So it's not just Zhao Tang that got taken away. It was also Tanaka too. So they both got locked up. And so it's up to Seba to kind of resolve this situation, because for whatever reason they're doing something. Well, I was about to say, we find out they run experiments at the lab. Apparently they took over the lab like a year ago, and they're trying to change assassin like stuff. It's like guns and knives are so old fashioned. They want to kind of go in a new era. So I guess maybe finding other means of performing assassinations. Like, we don't know this group's name and what the purpose is, but Reindeer Guy as well as Seba are only like a few. I think there's like 3 other leaders involved. So 2 or 3 other leaders, because we meet one of them near the end of the episode. But the lab is presented as like this front, as a museum. And I love they go in there, and then the ladies are like, oh, you want to take these dino photos? They're like, no. We hate photos. No, leave us alone. And immediately take the photos afterwards. And they're like, oh, like, was it 4,900 yen? You could get like a large print. He's like, oh, I'll get one of them. And they're like, oh, these masks, like, oh, they do a great job. They cover up our face. And even Sakamoto's like, oh, they're actually pretty soft too. I'm like, it reminds me of the bit when they're like, it's like, oh, they came in with the stealth clothes for one scene, and then immediately we're like, yeah, we got bored of that bit, so we took them off. It kind of gives me that same energy. At least they kept these dinosaur heads on longer. So then they have to deal with like booby traps later on, like stuffed bears that's got like guns in their mouths. And it's like, oh, Sakamoto, have you ever fought a bear before? He's like, yeah, I've been trained in like different animal combat. It's like, Jesus. But fighting a dinosaur was a first. But his immediate thought was, oh my God, I'd love to get this for Hannah, a moving dinosaur. So he's like, right, let's try not to damage it. I want to kind of keep it intact as much as possible. And Shin's the one that suggested using his stun gun, and he's like, oh, brilliant. And I love Shin was like, brilliant. Sakamoto thought my idea was brilliant. He was living high off that recognition. And I just thought that was dope. And just Sakamoto trying so hard not to disrupt this thing, but his gun gets destroyed. He's like, all right, screw it. Like, this is kind of annoying. And so he just like bashes the thing, destroys like the like firing mechanism, like the gun or whatever in its mouth, flies in the air and heavily drop kicks the thing, breaking it to pieces. But it's like, yeah, the great thing about dinosaurs is the fact is they don't move. So that's kind of the better option anyway. And it's like, whatever you say, Sakamoto. But then Shin meets up with the other scientist and they explained the whole situation. Then one of the leaders showed up and he's a psychopath. I was sitting there looking, I was like, is he drinking from a blood bag? It looked like it, especially later on when he stabbed one of the scientists in the hand with a pencil pen and he starts licking it. I was like, nah, and I was like, even though he's kind of like the crazy scientist, I'm like, did you have some natural affinity? Like, is it going to be like some scientifical vampire thing where it's like whatever experiments you did to yourself makes you want blood? I don't know if we're going to get the dude's like full thing because he gets knocked out by the end, but I don't know if that's enough to knock him out. He didn't immediately get up, so who knows? But yeah, he like injects Shin with something and it basically screws with the signals to his brain. And now he's like, oh, with the flip of the switch, I can make it so that you talk differently. It's like, Jesus. At first I was like, oh, that could be scary because that could end up, I mean, your brain, obviously the signals to your brain control so much that I'm like, that's pretty bad because that'd be a situation of, cool, you'll make your brain forget how to breathe. It feels like that could be deadly. So that's why I'm like, I don't know if we're done with this guy or not. Sakamoto just laid him out, but I mean, I don't know if he's down for the count or not. We'll see. And obviously Sakamoto's not going to, Shin's not going to just sit by and just let the scientists here get hurt. They're like, why don't you just stay hidden? He's just like, yeah, I don't like tight spaces. But it's like, this place meant somewhere to him. He grew up here. You know, it's his childhood home. No matter how wild of a situation it was, he still does seem to have good memories here, especially the head of it. Who he's locked up with Tanaka and I keep calling guy Tanaka. I think that was his name, but whatever the case may be, he's locked up with Xiao Tang, so he's going to help them break out. So that's going to be interesting, that reunion. Hopefully it's not going to be a tragic situation of the moment Shin and him are reunited, like only for Shin to lose him immediately, because Shin's never come back here, which I think is so interesting. Oh yeah, I also forgot to talk about, I think it's kind of a neat little detail, that the only reason why they're able to track down Xiao Tang when she was taken is because she has that tag from Shin's apron, and apparently there's a GPS tracker in it. I was like, oh, so does that mean you don't have anything on? Well, I guess if Xiao Tang had worn her apron, it would probably be a different thing. So he probably has both of their aprons tagged, but it's only because she likes to wear Shin's. I actually have to go back. Is like, does she even wear hers when she's doing work generally? Because it seems like she only, well, maybe she does, and like I said, only switches to him when she switches to Shin's when she's doing a dirty job and stuff like that. This whole situation, I'm sure they're going to butt heads still in the future. That's going to be a running gag, but I think this whole situation is going to make Xiao Tang kind of feel more understanding of, because it's like, probably, you know, she lost her family because they were murdered, but we don't know if Shin's circumstances were similar, or did they die in an accident, did they just abandon him or whatever. But it made her feel sympathetic to him, knowing like, oh, like, your powers, you use them and stuff like that, and but there's kind of a heavy curse and sadness associated with them, and the way these people talk about you, I shouldn't have talked about you that way. So it's going to bring them closer, but like I said, they're still going to butt heads, kind of like the sibling thing that they've kind of got going on already. Also, the whole bit with Sakamoto when he came out the locker and his head was like a rectangle. I was like, Jesus. I was like, oh, and they kept it going too. Like, even by the episode's end, he still had a rectangle head. I was like, oh, I don't know why that's so jarring and weird to look at. I don't know why it kind of messes my head a little. But the ending tease at the end of the episode is we have two members of the Order showing up, which is interesting. They just happen to show up at a place. Apparently, this place might have some ties to X or Slur, um, which is interesting. So I wonder, are I mean, it's interesting because like when you do look like those people associated with this assassins group that's taken over this lab, they are in the opening, and the last person that you see in that section of the opening is Slur. So it kind of is like that is interesting. So maybe there are some direct ties, maybe more indirect ties. Who knows what that's all about? Because we don't even know his motivation of why he's bumping off assassins, slash hitmen and stuff like that. But either way, well, it's gonna be interesting to see, considering like, well, because Negamo, I'm trying to remember from like, was it last episode, episode before last, where he was lying to the, I think, yeah, because he lied to the other Order members about meeting up with Sakamoto. So, I mean, this is going to be their first time probably seeing Sakamoto before he retired. I mean, we have no idea the last time he operated with the Order up until like meeting Aoi and quitting, so what those final conversations were like. Did they end off on the best of terms? I don't think so, because I think some of them were talking, at least one of the guys was like talking about Sakamoto in not the greatest way. So I think like probably didn't end on the best terms, because it's probably a thing of the only way you leave the Order is in a box being dead, so you don't get to just walk away. But once again, it's been 5 years and they never came after him until like now. Someone's only now putting a bounty on his head, so there's a lot there. So some very, very interesting developments, some interesting things to keep in mind as we go into the next episode. I'm curious, I doubt this is all going to be resolved. It'll probably be another like 3 episode thing, just like the whole amusement park situation was basically 3 episodes, if I remember correctly. So we'll see if this situation ends up being the same, because there's a few leaders left to take care of, plus you have Order members showing up, so stuff is really about to pop off. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.